got just probably lemonade in there, right? Or iced tea, Christine?
No.
I just hit record, just so you know, Christine. All right, so a couple things. Just because it's our Google Meet recently, and Lester's been starting to give us some issues. You might not see everybody, but we got a lot of people in here behind the scenes, in front of the scenes. We're only tracking participants that are within Lester. Like, there's a whole lot going on. So we're going to try to keep it moving. If there's something that doesn't work for you, just stop us. Our amazing moderator is here. So Don, Christine, at least on my to your right.
Yep, I see her. Yep.
She's been helping out, doing a great job keeping me on pace. Or when we're sharing screens, if there's a question, you'll hear Christine. So Christine, Don, Christine.
My pleasure, Christine.
Nice to meet you, Don.
You as well.
So if you hear that voice coming over the booming over the
I'll try and be nice. I won't just be like, yo, there's a question. I'll try to be professional.
No, I'm good with that though too. Hey, I'll roll. You got football helmets on your wall. I'm good.
Yeah, that's my son. Like I came home from work one day and there were random football teams. Look at that.
I love it.
No Patriots helmet. Matt would like to know too that there's a Miami Dolphins helmet behind the door of my daughter's room. Given that he's the only Dolphins fan.
You're raising a right. Florida. I like it. We had a couple other people pop in. Bruce from New Jersey, Jennifer from Long Island, and I thought I saw our Keisha from Hawaii, who always seems to make it, which is pretty cool too. So besides our Lester, we have some people from Aloha.
Yeah.
All right, so it must be morning there. So good stuff. So I did hit record just so people know. I totally forgot last week when Mike was here till like 2 minutes in, but we picked it back up. So this time I started a little bit earlier. And like I said to Don, we're going through a couple transitions here. So sometimes the screen's going to move, but we had 216 people were interested as of yesterday. So we got a lot of people behind the scenes. So one of the things, so that you know, Christine, you may see a question pop up from somebody who's not on the screen. It's a real question. Like, so I'm
yeah, the screen looks a lot different this week.
Yeah, so something's going on. I think the guy who created the grid view and then Google are fighting. So so you might see some questions come through from people who you don't see either on the screen or names pop up.
Yeah, it only says, I only see that there are 14 people in the chat.
Right, so it's only tracking the Lester folks too. So and I'm letting people in. And if you hear a doorbell, Don, that I got that going on my side of letting people in or different things. So
no problem. You may hear her cat on my end. I've got a cat I tried to lock up and she would not cooperate. So
so I'm going to be driving the scenes, the technical scenes. Christine's going to be driving the moderating, and you're going to be the content with anyone interested, asking questions, jumping in. I'll do a quick introduction. I had the pleasure to meet Don like a couple years ago in passing, but then last year in an event in Texas, LearnFest, and just got to meet him, see some of the work he's doing. And it's always, for me, what I always gravitate to are people who do things that amplify student voice. And last week he had Mike Earnshaw on talking about podcasting. I shared a little bit about YouTube. I've seen Don go from working with kids with one iPad, he's an Apple Distinguished Educator, to full-fledged studio students creating weekly content. Now they're doing, he had Fox Broadcaster. What was his name again?
Joe Buck.
Joe Buck was on their show. Like they're doing some great things. So in Lester, one of the things we've been trying to do is amplify student voice. And we've been using some tools like Flipgrid and Padlet. And Maggie's here, who's been doing some of the video pieces herself and really trying to find, and this was before March 13th. That was our date that we kind of shut down.
Yeah.
But now it's really accenting how students are self-advocating, creating content through YouTube. And as we continue to move that direction, 2 weeks ago, we had some people on talking about how they utilize Wakelet, Flipgrid, different resources to enhance students within the creation of content. And then, like I said, last week we had Mike on to talk about podcasting. And then when he's talking, I was thinking, how can we take this another step further? And Don came to mind because he is somebody who's taken the student voice piece, what Mike has done for podcasting, Don has been doing for video piece. I showed YouTube a little bit, but I don't work with students directly. I know how to operate this YouTube, but Don works with students, and I want to always bring people and share with us who have been working with students and seeing some of the great successes. So, Don, take it away.
Hey, well,
you want to kind of give us your story, kind of how you got to where you are, and how did the video piece, like, is that your job? Do you do that in your district? Like, fill people in.
Sure. So I'll just give you the brief Reader's Digest of that, because I'd love to get into more of the why and talk to your staff about the power of video. So for me, this is my 18th year, well, going into my 19th year in education now, but my third career. So I started out in radio and television journalism, worked for a CBS station, radio and TV in Central Illinois. And so that was going to be my gig. That was going to be my long-term thing. Education and teaching was not on my radar at all. And then I worked in business for about 7 years. So I got a lot of business acumen, and that's important because I run my class like a business, in a sense, like a production company in a sense. And I turned to education right after September 11th, 2001. I was laid off in November. The tech industry took a huge hit, and I was severely impacted emotionally, and just kind of decided I needed to make a change. And so that's when I got into education. So what I do now, I'm in the classroom every day, or virtually every day. I teach my second year of teaching. They split my job. So they saw the ability that I could bring to the table of creating videos. So doing staff recognition videos, I started a talk show, I did training videos. And so I teach 3 classes, all multimedia, video, and film production. And then I still produce videos. So I'm a creator myself. I create all the time, whether it's for my district and for consulting purposes, or really my son had friends over on a Friday night, and I was watching them, and I was trying out some new tricks of what I might do for the fall. So I was making videos on a Friday night. So my passion really has always been video, and I got into teaching video, and it was really to teach the upcoming broadcast journalist or filmmaker. This is back in 2005. And then YouTube happened in 2006. And we started publishing on a site called SchoolTube in 2007, which was an educational platform, which we still use today. And quickly over the last decade, now everybody's a producer. And it's interesting, I have some of the content that I share today it's like 7 and 8 years old. It was, it's more popular now today because there's more access to devices in order to create videos. And one of the things I was anxious to talk to you all about today, and why I'm so happy you asked me, Matt, is because I'm always on board with trying to demystify the anxiety of what a video is, a video production, how long it takes, and it's visual storytelling, and it can be just as easy or easier and more fun than a Google slide or a poster project. And not that there's anything wrong with those, but this is just another tool in the toolkit. So for the last decade or so, I've traveled the world talking to students and educators about ways to integrate media. And it's not only just to use video for video's sake. I'm a passionate media literacy advocate. And I think one of the things that really is important when we create videos is to understand why and what are some of the lessons being learned outside of the content area when we create a video. And a lot of that is wrapped around media literacy. And that's a literacy, I think, that's just as important as reading and writing and math. And it's not focused on enough in American education. And there's no better time than now. Like, we're thrust into it, right? We were thrust into it, for me, March 12th. Sounds like you all were already involved with it ahead, before that, which is great. So I hope today maybe just to offer a little bit of value, maybe some ideas, maybe validate some of the things you guys are doing, at least from my perspective, that I think is really great for kids.
Awesome. No, I think that's a big piece of this, is really just trying to find, and for me, selfishly, I just think you're a great guy and doing some great things, and want to see how you continue to work with students in the capacity that you have. And at the same point, we are in uncertain times here in Leicester and really all the country, but we even had our task force last night about what we're doing. And if it is something that we're not fully back into what we think is the normalcy, I really want to push doing student podcast, doing student video, like really trying to have that, the media literacy that you talked about. So I'm just as much a learner in all of this when I've been chatting with people. So one of the things I want to dive in, and you talked about demystifying, and I mean, Christine, I see Christine on here is starting to do, or has now her own YouTube channel, and people just need that start.
Right.
What are some of the fears that you have seen trying to start creating videos and getting students to do that? And love to hear.
Sure. So for a long time it was, well, we don't have a video camera, and I don't know how to operate it. And most educators don't feel like they're video producers. And so there's not a lot of confidence to teach it. And I think if we could take a step back and understand that we don't need to be the experts to teach it, we should know a little bit about it for sure. And I never ask my students to do something that I wouldn't do myself. That's kind of been a lot of self-exploration, like, what are some new ways that I can have my students reflect back? So I'm going to give this a shot myself. So that's been one of the fears. And understanding now we have an entire generation of students that have now either grown up with a brand new device in their hands or a hand-me-down. Whether it was an iPod or an iPhone or an iPad or some form of tablet, they've known nothing other than that. And so, you know, I don't buy into this whole digital native thing. I think while they may be able to manipulate or operate the device, they don't really know why. Some ways, you know, that's where we come in as educators. And so I think the idea of creating a video, in my perspective, is not to stream on Hulu or on Netflix. It's to show content comprehension. It's to hear the student's voice and where they are in their learning process. And it's to tell stories. And one of the statistics I like to share, which I think I hope resonates. There was some research, even as far back as 2012, about the brain. And 90% of information transmitted to the brain is visual. And visuals are processed 60,000 times faster in the brain than text. And so when I had other teachers saying, oh, Don, you have the fun class, that's why kids like, you know, do well and like going there. That may be true, but I think it's because, and more real, that the work we're asking them to do is visually related, and we're not removing text. In fact, I tell my students when they walk into the class that if you don't want to write, or you're not a strong writer, or you don't want to write at all, you might want to find your class, because we're going to write a lot. And in fact, if you want to talk about it later, but one of the passion projects I did over this term to offer curriculum to my students was called Media Makers. And I interviewed alumni and professionals in the media business like Joe Buck and some others that were in film and sports and television and broadcast engineering. And the one thing they all leaned in on and said about their job in the video media industry was, you better know how to write. And so I think that's another myth, is that, well, video will replace writing. And it doesn't. In fact, it enhances it. And my goal always with my students is I want them to understand the text, and I want them to be able to pair visual to text. Because, you know, we've all been a part of stories since we were babies, when we had books read to us and we were thumbing through pages, and we read stories and we are asked to write stories at every level of education. But what we're not asking students to do is to create visual stories. So by the time they get to me in high school, I teach 9th through 12th graders in high school. I also teach at the university level. And even at the university level, these individuals don't know how to pair visual to text. They don't know how to tell a visual story. And in the environment that we're in today, knowing how to having that skill is marketable, beyond marketable, because in creating a video, you can collaborate. There's writing involved, it's visual to text. There's just so many things. There's troubleshooting, problem solving. There's so many things that are involved that when we break it down, the why becomes pretty huge. And so we're not asking kids ultimately to, it's like, well, I'm not teaching kids to be video producers. You're right. What you're doing is you're going to ask that student to show you in another way that they understand the knowledge, or maybe they don't. And that could be as simple as a screen capture, like you do with Flipgrid, right? Where you just ask them to pop on in 60 seconds, tell me 3 things you learned this week. Or it could be in a short 60-second or 90-second video. One of the other things I run into when I travel all over the country too is typically I find teachers who will, it's more high school teachers who will have an end of the year project. It's going to be a 10-minute documentary on all of these major things that they learned. And the problem with that is they've done nothing to practice to get to that point. And it's almost like asking, someone to write a 25-page research paper, but never teaching them how to do a 5-paragraph creative essay. Like that, you wouldn't do that. Like you would take steps to get to that 25-page research paper. It's the same model as if you throw a 10-minute documentary at the end of the year, you've done nothing to practice that. You're setting yourself and your students up for failure. And I think there could be a lot more added along the way. So a good friend of mine, Kristen Zemke, years ago, put it in really great terms. Video should be a practice, not a project. And so I live by that. And what I mean by that is every week students should be practicing with video, whether it's just recording a quick video on Flipgrid, or whether it's taking some photos and adding it with some voiceover that makes sense or connect to the curriculum, or whether it's diving in and creating some of their own content, whether it's a sketch, whether it's an interview. And so along the way, Matt, you've kind of seen this. I've created a lot of these resources. And one thing I've tried to do is to take a lot of the jargon away. Another demystification that I see in the business is, many times video teachers will talk about gear. They'll talk about equipment. They'll talk really high level editing, software, and all this other kind of stuff. And I try to take a huge step back from that and say, well, that's important. It really doesn't matter what you're using. Let's break it down in as simple terms that you and I can understand and that our students can understand. And that's how I've written the work that I've published through Apple Education, the curriculum that I've devised myself, that I've posted on my website, the collaboration that I've attached myself to. So one of the books that I wrote was edited by a 7th grade middle school social studies teacher, interview an expert, because she's like, Don, I want my 6th and 7th graders to be able to understand this and do this project. And I said, well, would you help me? And then I've worked with elementary teachers to use the app Clips. So while Clips might be helpful for high school, it's a phenomenal app for elementary. So how could we create some language around that? So all of those.
Don, I want to jump in for a second here.
Yeah.
I want to touch on 2 things you said and kind of extrapolate on those for us who
please
fall into the mystification of what you said. So you talked about that video should be a practice. And so the 2 things, and you said step back about equipment too. So could you share what like a practice would look like if we were just to start off? And I see a couple of our science teachers here, social studies, like if we're going to be practicing throughout, what would be some ways to do that? And then you said you step back from the big gear and things like that. So those 2 things, if you could touch on that a little bit, would be great.
Great question. Okay, how do you start? The first is if you're already doing Flipgrid, keep doing that. Have them take out the phone, the device, the laptop, webcam. 3 things that you learned this week, 3 challenges that you had. This is going to be super important, especially during distance learning, because if we aren't going to be in person every day, whether it's 100% away or 50% on site, we're going to go back in the fall. We're not going to have any relationship with those individuals, probably, right? Unless they're repeating our class or taking advanced levels in high school. So the way to connect is to see their face, hear their voice, hear the intonation, hear their struggle, hear their shyness. Kids aren't afraid of the camera. Look at their Snapchat feeds. They're not afraid of that. If they tell you they're afraid of the camera in your class, it's because they're afraid of being judged by me as the teacher, judged by students if everybody else sees it that aren't their peers. That's what they're afraid of. They're not afraid of getting in front of the camera. Getting in front of the camera is an adult issue, not a kid issue. So just get them speaking, listen to their voice. I can't tell here, and I'll put it in a phrase this way. So imagine you're in a class and you've got kids working in groups of 4 or 5. You posed a question, you want them working, collaborating, and then you're going to come back together as a class and devise a solution, let's say to a specific lab that the science teacher's working on, or a historical piece in social studies, and you divide it up in a group. Okay, I walk to that center of 4 kids and I'm like, so how's it going? It's going fine, Mr. Goble. You know, we're researching and we're taking a look at a few ways, you know, we're going to build this atom. Okay, so I might give them a few suggestions and then I walk away. And then I come back to the whole class, and what inevitably happens is one spokesperson for that group. Now, there are 3 or 4 other people in that group. I would love to hear what they heard me say. Wouldn't you kill to just know what they talked about when you walked away? Were they like, oh my God, Goble just confused us even more? Or, ooh, I have a great idea. He helped me think about this. So if you ask every kid, just 30 seconds, 60 seconds, tell me what you heard me say. Tell me what that means to you. Talk to me about your thought process. That's huge. That's a practice right there. That's like a one-on-one conference, right? So that's big. The other thing I would say, let's go back to science for a moment. And there was a science teacher who would have kids build a cell. And there were 16 steps involved to building the cell. So what he would do is he'd have them take pictures of each step and then email him the pictures. Well, I suggested to him, I said, you know, and he just didn't think of it this way. I said, I love the picture idea. That's phenomenal. Why don't you have the students offer then some narration of their thought process of why they put those pieces together in that order, put all 16 photos together in a quick app like iMovie or WeVideo or Clips or Quick, and narrate it. And they each should narrate it, because I want to hear everybody's voice. It doesn't serve anybody to have everyone watch Matt edit while 3 others just sit there and do nothing. So if we have access to a device for each person, and that's allowing then kids to use, you know, bring in phones, or if you have a Chromebook, whatever it is. So that's a practice, having every student give their explanation, maybe having every student have a part in the editing process. So if you have a 16-step process to building a cell and you have 4 kids in that group, each kid should be an expert of one portion, 1/4 of that process. And now they're learning from each other as well. And then they have to not only explain that in narration, but you may ask them to explain it in class then as well. I mean, there's ways to do that. Or what I like to do after kids create that video is I like them to blog. I like them to write their process. What went well? What didn't go well? What did Don say that confused you that Maggie said made sense? Why do you feel you got the harder portion of the production, whereas Matt got the easier? You know, however you want to phrase it. But I have kids write, because inevitably I'm not with that group, right, the whole time. I have to go over and help all these other kids. And if I'm distance learning, I'm not with them at all. And so that's an easy practice that I can ask them to do.
All right, so I got to follow up to one of the things you said, and I'm going to bring in Christine, the author of Anxious, great book from Times 10. You said that students, if they're afraid to get in front of the camera, it's because they don't want to be judged. So I'd hear from both of you, again, because Christine wrote a great book about students and supporting students with anxiety. I'd love to hear from her. If you don't mind, our moderator jumping into a speaker role.
Please, yeah.
Don, if you could then, after she goes, some of the things.
I didn't know I was going to be put on the spot, but I'm game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say, Christine, is that, I believe Don, I'm not saying he's not accurate. I'm just saying, what are some things you could tell and share with teachers to help students get over that if we're moving in this direction of trying to get students in front of camera and different things? And then again, great question, Keisha, judged by the teacher or judged by other students? So,
okay, I'll jump in if that's okay, Don.
Yeah, please.
So as someone with anxiety, I can speak from personal experience. So when I started kind of vlogging and making videos and putting them out there, the concept of it was absolutely terrifying for me with my anxiety. I don't know if I worried so much about being judged so much as people like just looking at me, like having eyes on me was really a difficult thing for me to kind of grapple with. And what worked for me was being able to do it completely on my terms. So if I wanted anyone else in the room to turn their back, which is actually how I did my first video, I did have support of a friend that was with me, and I was like, you can't look at me, like turn around. And so you know, that seems silly to me now because I've done it so many times. It's just second nature. But like in that moment, it was really, really important that I could come up with any type of control that I could have in the situation. And for me, that was just, I know everyone's going to see this afterwards, but like right now I'm embarrassed that I'm filming this, so nobody look at me. So I think for teachers with students with anxiety, when it comes to putting them on video, I think it's all about small steps. You know, I talk in my book about small attainable goals. And the first thing is like, let's just get the kid comfortable on camera. I'm not worried about where this video goes per se. Like it doesn't need to go to the whole class, or it just goes to the teacher. And, you know, once the student does it a few times, then maybe they're willing to let a small group look at it. But I think it is really important that when it comes to that actual filming of it, that can be the most anxiety inducing part of the experience. And I think if the kid needs to go into a room and do it on their own and just hold the camera like it's in selfie mode and film the video, I think that needs to be okay. And I think you just start small and kind of go from there.
Awesome.
I love that. I love that philosophy. Yeah, find an entry point.
Yep.
You know, and the other thing about the video, doesn't have to be about the student. Like we don't have to hear their or see their face. Let's just hear their voice. That's why I love the podcasting idea, or even just an audio. There's so much that can be learned through a voice, but also through a face. I'll give you another example. And Christine, you're a great example of just you found that entry point and you did it a few times. Video is a process. It's not an end product. And many times, yeah, if it's just me seeing the video, that's fine. Then if it's maybe a close friend seeing it or another trusted adult, what I have found is that many kids who are so afraid of being on camera in the beginning end up loving it the most at the end. And those who think they're going to love it and are all gung-ho suddenly realize, oh, this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. And then they start to kind of, you know, take a few steps back. But I want to give you a real life example. So I had a student this year, one of the toughest students probably in my entire career. And she was tough because she was, and ironically, her name was Shia, but she went by Shy. She would want to run out of class. She didn't want to be in school. She just didn't want to be there. Like school was not for her, much less now trying to put her in a video class and put her in front of the camera. The first time I got her in front of the camera, I stood right next to her. I'm like, I got you. Like, I'll be right here. And it was fine. And it was still, I think, traumatic for her in a way. Like it was really, really difficult. And so to get her to do anything, an adult needed to sit next to her. Okay. Now we break March 12th and we don't come back. And I'm going, what am I going to do? I mean, like, I'm really worried about Shy. My good kids were going to produce no matter what. What about Shy? So interestingly, Shy, it took a few weeks. She emailed me and I said, well, here's what we can do. She didn't have a phone. There was one phone in the house, one cell phone mom used. The students did have MacBook Airs because we were one-to-one device that way. So she's like, I can't be on camera, Mr. Goble. I don't know what you expect me to do. And I can't record anything. And I said, all right, well, how about this? What if I send you some footage and you can edit it? Just edit. Follow these steps and you can edit it on your device. Let's see how that works. And she did. I gave her like 15 shots that I created. And I said, I want you to pick the best 5 to put in a story model that we had been talking about. And she did. And it looked pretty good. And she emailed me and said, I'd like to do that again. And I said, okay. So then the next time I had my son go out and shoot, again, like 12 shots. And we said, Shy, pick the best 6. And it was even better. It was really good. And I was like, Shy, this is really good. Like you understand the editing. And she's like, I'm having so much fun. She was emailing me nearly every day. And so then I said, okay. She's like, I would like to do a project on nature, but I don't have a phone to go out and like shoot things when I go out for walks. And I said, well, there's a website called pexels.com. It's like the most beautiful footage, you have drone footage and just gorgeous stuff. That's all Creative Commons that contributors offer freely to use, not for, you know, sales, but for educational use. So I found some amazing video for her, but again, more than she needed. And she put together this beautiful video around Earth Day. And so for her, and she contacted me more than any student while we were away. Now that tells me a few things. One, there was a connection to the visuals. There was the anxiety removed from worrying about her face being on camera, but she loved telling stories. She loved having she was nervous. She's like, how am I going to do this? I don't have a phone. Suddenly the content was provided for her, but not done for her. She had to manipulate it. There was that anxiety went away, and she felt like on her terms, this is now how I can do this. And then she kept asking for more. She produced more than any student that I had, than some of my best students that I have had for 4 years. Can you explain that? The only way I can explain that is that she found a niche that suddenly she had some success with. She got some positive reinforcement and feedback from, and it felt good because there was a product to show. It wasn't a multiple choice test like, you did great on that. You got an 80, shy, way to go. It was a visual representation of her ideas, even though the content wasn't hers. So there are so many sources that are out there. For example, if you use an online source like WeVideo, WeVideo has over 1 million assets that students can choose from. It's the selection of those assets to pair the visual to the text that as a teacher, I'm interested in, not as much that they're on camera. I may want their voice to it for explanation, or I may not. The images themselves with text maybe on the screen could show me enough that they know what they're doing. In fact, I have a 6-word story, 6 unique shot project that does all that. 6 pieces of text, 6 words, 6 shots. That's it. I don't need their voice. I don't need their face. It's a great entry point.
Oh, no, that's awesome. And I can't believe half hour flies by as much as it did. And we still got time. I'm not saying we're done, but I want to make sure we get to some things that on your website. But I did want to jump over to Maggie for a second, because she brought up something that, so we talked about kids being judged or who they would see, but Maggie, you brought up about who saw it after the fact. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit? Like you were saying, the control, it was the control piece.
Yeah, I mean, like you have alluded to, the students, we feel like they're on video all the time because, you know, they're on Instagram Live, they're on Snapchat, they're sharing pictures and videos of themselves all the time. However, when you bring it to an academic setting, anytime they feel like they're not an expert, they're so afraid of messing up. And it's really hard. I mean, you can talk to them about normalizing failure until you're blue in the face and show them that you fail all the time. But I kind of have hit that wall with students a lot, and I've done the, like, well, you don't have to show your face, it can just be your voice. I'll be the only one seeing it, pushing them past that, especially the students who really like to be high achievers, like they are perfectionists. And, you know, a lot of times students who have a lot of anxiety around school and grades and, you know, presenting to the world, I find that I hit the wall with them a little bit in producing something and going outside of their comfort zone, even when I've tried to kind of build up that comfort in front of the camera. I try and tell them it's not inherent. Like most people, it's very normal to be nervous in front of a camera for any reason, in front of any audience. But as an English teacher, audience and writing for an audience is very important to me, to try and communicate to my kids. So I think that it's good that they're aware of their audience. I just trying to get them to not be afraid of their audience, I think, is one of the biggest hurdles that I've hit in trying to get my kids to produce videos.
Sure.
Awesome.
I have a few thoughts on that. First is, and that's where practice and project come into play. And it sounds like you're doing a good job of that, Maggie, where we have to normalize it and make it a part of the workflow day one. So when my students come in day one, I've done this for the greatest thing I've added to my classroom was about 8 or 9 years ago, was to have kids create blogs, websites, and that's how they were going to turn in their work. And I gave them full control, though, of how they were going to create that website. I have to tell you, it was like a moth to light. We use Weebly.com because it's free and it's drag and drop. It's a great app. It's web-based. It was easy for me to learn, and so therefore it was easy for me to teach. But day one, I said, we're going to create a website. That's how you're going to turn in your work. You're going to turn in links, either blog or your video or whatever it is. And they got to create. I've had to pull them away from wanting to create that website because you talk about control and ownership. Now they have the ownership of it. Now, the only thing I told them was that we were using the app Weebly. That's it. I didn't tell them how well, and I said, you need to have a video page, a blog page, a home page with a bio. What you do beyond that is up to you. You can choose the theme, the template, it doesn't matter. It's been the greatest thing I have ever implemented because the shyest kids in the classroom have been the loudest on their blogs. And the blogs are based on the videos that they've created because I'm asking them to explain their thought process. And so when you, and again, I attach that text to visual. That's what we're doing. And so maybe it's not a blog for you or for the teacher for their class. To say day one, we are going to use video in some way, shape, or form. We ask students to do visual projects all the time. This is another avenue to say this is what we're going to do. How that looks for each student can be different. That's the other thing. We can really modify any way we want. We've talked about this now. You can either be on camera, you don't have to be on camera. But I may want to hear your voice, I may not want to hear your voice. You can build up to that and really modify in a multitude of ways. That's really the power of it. It's not in a box. This is how we're going to deliver it. You can offer these 3 apps. Hey, here are 3 apps I think might be useful. If you find one outside of that helps, great. Because what I'm grading is, do you understand the content? Can I hear you? Can I see you? Is your message clear? Are you pairing visual to text? Are you explaining Romeo and Juliet through your video the way that I'm hoping you comprehended it? Those are the things. Again, go back, Matt, to just demystifying a little bit. I think, teachers worry about the polish of the end product. With video, as long as we can hear what we need to hear, whether it's music or voice, and see what we're supposed to see, whether it's the student face or the visual, whether it's clear or not, that's it. They're the production. After that, it's content. Does it make sense? Does it have a message? Does it have a beginning, a middle, and an end? Is it related to the topic that we talked about, or is it just some random, visuals thrown together? And so through the video process, you have a lot of troubleshooting, you have problem solving, you have critical thinking. What are the best choices I need to make? Where does that visual go related to that text? How can I best clearly and concisely state this without getting too wordy? These are the wonderful steps along the way of creating a video. And in fact, Matt, if I can jump in really quick and share my screen.
You don't have to jump in. You just keep going.
Well, I'm going to share my screen. I'll jump in to share my screen. All right. Hopefully this comes up. I've got an image on my website on one of the pages that I really would love for you all to see. There's the data that I was mentioned earlier. So this data is on my website. Here's a slide I like to show. This is the process of media literacy and really a great process to video production. Okay, it starts at the top, access. Access to a couple of things. One, what kind of access to technology do we have? Do we have a Chromebook? Do we have an iPhone? Do we have an iPad? Do we have a tablet? What do we have? How many do we have? Does everyone have one? Do we need to share? What is that going to look like for everybody? And access, obviously, is a huge piece during distance learning. We know this, that's a huge gap. So that's where we need to start, is access. It's not only access to device, but then that obviously either may limit or grant us great access to information, that information to plan and to process. So now we move into analyze. Okay, so we have our device. Now we need to analyze the information. What is Mr. Goble asking us to do? So that's going to require some research. That's going to require us to maybe do some outlines, some bullet points. It may require us to do a synopsis, an opening summary. It may require us to do maybe a podcast to just kind of get our thoughts out there. It could be a brain dump and a brainstorm. Once we get all of our information that we need, that leads us into evaluate. Now we've got all this information, we need to narrow it. It's too much. I'm not making a 90-minute feature-length film. I'm making a 60-second video. So I need to evaluate what's the most important information, how I'm going to, use that information. What are the most important pieces of video, visuals, audio, pictures, text, whatever the case may be. That evaluation then leads us into the creation. Now you can create with anything. You create with iMovie, you create with WeVideo, you create, SchoolTube.com has a brand new tool called Watch It. That has over 100 million assets you can choose from. You use clips. It doesn't matter. Like you can use
Don,
an app.
can I jump in real quick?
Please.
When you say assets, I'm thinking you're referring to things that students can use, like images or things like that. So you've said that
Yes.
a few times. Can you just explain that?
Yeah, an asset to me is a picture. It's a video clip that I may have taken. It's a piece of audio, narration, a voiceover I recorded. Maybe it's a sound effect. Any piece of media that's going to go into that video. And a video is obviously has images, text, and audio. Those are the three main assets that a video must possess, right, in order for it to make sense. So that's where you mix it all together in the creation process. And one of the other big fears is editing, Matt. We talked earlier. Well, demystifying. Okay, use clips, and you don't need to edit. You're trimming with your fingers. Use an app called Quick, Q-U-I-K, and it does the editing for you. You choose a template. It'll put it and process it for you. Therefore, you can focus on the content, the order that the images should appear, that the video should appear, the text should appear. You can add voiceover, you can add music, and there's royalty-free music already embedded in it. And it will match up, just like clips. It'll match up to the length of the video. You don't need to trim the audio, lengthen it, whatever. It'll do it for you. So take the editing out of it. So now we create this video, and it should be 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. We're not asking for a huge thing here. Less is more. You're also then teaching a media literacy skill of consumption. People really aren't watching video unless you're sitting down now, binge watching, it's full series. We really watch videos in shorter chunks. Then that moves us into the reflection piece. That's where my blog that my students write is huge. So you might have them blog. You might have them do a video reflection. I have a friend, Steve Douglas, who has a whole process on offering a video reflection. That could be the student on camera telling you in Flipgrid. That could be their reflection. Whatever that looks like for you, they must reflect. They have to think about their process. They have to think about what worked, what didn't work, what made sense, what didn't make sense. And that leads to action. And that action then could be, we need to do a few steps differently. Or now I can up level this. Rather than just doing a podcast, now I can add visuals. Now, rather than just adding visuals that I found online, I can create my own visuals. Now, rather than just creating my own visuals, I can actually interview someone. So you kind of act and think about the next steps you can go moving forward. And that's the action part could be, boy, this student really got it. I can advance them. These students didn't. Now I know where I need to go back. The evaluation phase, they just kept too much in. We need to go back and work on some evaluation processes. And then starts again then with access. The continuum goes on because it's a practice, not a project. And I think if we can follow that methodology, if you look at it, is it any different than any other major project, paper, visual presentation we've ever asked students to do before? And it's not. And so there's my case. If I'm being a lawyer, Matt, there's my case.
All right. Well, so what I'll say is the jury is that you're guilty of student engagement and a lot of great ideas. So, but what I will say is you have a lot of resources to share and some robust ideas and things to help teachers along the way. Would you mind going back to your website,
Yep.
just showing the folks here? I'll throw the website into the chat, and I'll send it out as I have with the updates and things. But could you walk us through what they might find, or what some things, like, instead of just surfing through it and just checking out all your cool photos, where's our hotspots?
Love it. That is such a great question. So let's get into that. All right. So if you visit dongoble.com, this is what you'll see. My most recent content will always be on the homepage. I do tailor a lot of my work to broadcast journalism, video production teachers. So you may see that and be like, oh, broadcast teacher, virtual meeting, that's not me. Don't worry about it. Bypass it. Go right through it. You can scroll through my homepage. I have a podcast here about distance learning. Scroll through any of that you want. All right. Where the hotspots might be for you would be published. So if you go to the published page and just click on published, you'll find a few things. My Passion Project Media Maker series, where I interview a lot of professionals in the media business, they all talk about, what's interesting is they don't talk technical for the most part. They talk about networking, being a good person to work with, relationships. There's some great just life lessons in there. I mentioned the 6-word story, 6 unique shot, enhancing writing through multimedia. You'll find that, and if you click on that title, which is also a hyperlink, it'll take you to an entire page. This is a free book that you can access through any Apple product. If you cannot access, you don't have an Apple product, you can get the PDF of it. Of course, it takes the interactivity out of it, but it is accessible for the hearing and sight impaired if you use it on an iPhone or an iPad. And since I wrote that book in 2013, I mentioned it's been a while now, I've added a lot of additional resources. So rather than revising the book, I created this web page. I've added additional instructional material. I've added another book online that might help with some of the work. I've added it now. Teachers have used clips to do 6-word stories. So I've added example of what a storyboard might look like and an actual example video, some tutorials then on clips. How do I use clips? If you want to use iMovie, if you love the work and you want to share it out to the world, we've got a passion project of my students, the Global Student News Network. And what are 6-word stories all about? Great place to start for inspiration and ideas. Here's a video, that TED Talk that you can go with. So the whole web page really dives in. I've got a few pages like that. If you go under published and you've got interview an expert, another great way. And when we talk about experts, I mean anybody is an expert. And right now, if students have access to a laptop or a phone or anything at home, people are at home. That's how I was able to get media makers off the ground and interview a national sports figure, sports announcer like Joe Buck. He's at home. People are willing to say yes, especially to teachers and students. So find experts, find authors, find scientists, find historians to come and talk to your class or have students interview them. And so I've got a book on that. I've got a free webinar on interviewing, a PowerPoint conversation, I mean, there's stuff, right? There's just access to materials. The other place you might want to visit then is resources. And if you click on resources, and things, I kind of have them in multiple places. You got the media makers again, you've got 6-word stories. Everyone can create video. And within this particular Apple iBook, multi-touch book, you have, if I want to make a silent movie, a movie pitch, teaching a show, your own introduction. I have a lot of curriculum for the broadcast teachers that are out there. More tips for clips. I've got a project using iMovie trailers. I've got blogs I've written and mini lessons. I've got resources from a good friend here, Claudio Zavala Jr. He talks all about creating YouTube videos and using actually Adobe products. Adobe Spark Video is a great app. It's free. It's web-based. You can use it on any device. It's got templates for storytelling already in there. Claudio is a great resource. And so I've got my guidelines for Weebly. If you heard me say, oh, that portfolio sounds really cool. He used Weebly. Here you go. He talked about WeVideo. There's a great guy, Darren White, created through Book Creator, Ranga's Guide to WeVideo. If you click on that, it'll take you through WeVideo, and a digital storytelling toolkit from WeVideo. It's got all the answers there for you. So published and resources would really be two of the places that I would live. And under those two, you have multiple subpages. Like I've got one with green screen, editing with iMovie, online lessons. Let's even go to that online lesson here for a moment. And we scroll down. I had kids just daily doing video journals. A video journal is a great way to find out what's happening with kids, their learning process. How do you do a video journal? Here you go. How do you do Adobe Spark stuff? Here you go. Black History Month challenge we did in February, one of our educators in our district. And I was like, why did we have to just save that for February? That's a great like history project in and of itself. How to do Zoom interviews. Well, Don, you know, you just said student could do a Zoom interview with an author. How do you do that? Here you go. If you want to teach storytelling, Pixar in a box. Gosh, that's an enormously popular, and it'll teach you all about the Pixar movies and how they all follow the same process. So that might be a great place. So published resources. I was talking to one of the other teachers before we started recording, green screen. If and when we get back into our schools and you have a green screen, here's some great green screen ideas. And my good friend Bruce, who's on the call here as well, I've got Bruce, I know, here you go. There, you and Mrs. Levin there have a great wakelet of green screen resources. So within this resource are a lot of other great resources. So Bruce, shout out to you for putting together all of these green screen resources on a wakelet. And then you're saying, well, what the heck is a wakelet? It's a fantastic curator.
They're not saying that, Don. That was 3 weeks ago's PD. They're not saying that.
Wonderful. So there you go. I've talked too much probably, so I'll stop sharing at this point, and maybe there's a question or two before we need to wrap.
Not even close. You didn't talk too much. You gave us a ton of information. You packed it in there, but if there's questions, fire away. Just unmute yourself, ask, and then in a few minutes, I do want to ask how people get in touch with you, Twitter or whatever. So we'll end with that. But if you have a question, just unmute yourself and go.
I don't have a question, but I would start where you're at. So if you're a classroom teacher, whatever you're doing at that point, if you're doing science experiments, you can have the kids even just record doing the science experiment and just start as small as you can instead of with a big project. And I'm a technology teacher in my school. I have people come to me saying, you know, I'm going to do this Spanish project. The kids are going to go 3 places. They're going to record all over here. I'm going to do the whole project in one day. I'm like, no, like start very small, I think is a great advice, because I think people start too big and then you run out of time, or it takes a lot. Every project I do, even with students, it takes 3 times as long as you think it would. So that's another thing just to kind of schedule for.
Bruce, I appreciate you saying that too, because I think that's another drawback. Teachers think it may take too long. I always say whatever amount of time you would plan for a research project or a Google slide project or a poster project, offer that same amount of time. That being said, if we do it as a practice, we can record each other, in class. In the interview an expert, I talk about for elementary, remember the old turn and talk? Hey, we just read a book, turn to your partner now and talk to them about it. How about turn and interview? Turn and interview your partner, ask 4 or 5 pointed questions about the book, and then have them turn and interview you and do the same thing. That can happen in 5 minutes, right? So while we want to absolutely prepare the right amount of time, even that 6-word story project, I've had teachers take 2 weeks doing it. I've had teachers do it in 45 minutes. It all depends on what your end goal is. Go to the end of what you want the students to know and understand, and then figure out, okay, what's the best technology app, or is video the best choice? Video might not always be the best choice, and so you can step away from that. So find other ways though to implement small practices.
Awesome. All right, Don, last minute pitch, because I know we have people here not from Leicester too. I'm going to send out all the resources and everything from Leicester. If people are outside and have further questions or issues, like have you connect with their own staff, how can people get in touch with you?
Sure. And I'm gonna do that. And then let me end. I'm gonna pepper you with a bunch of ideas
All
for
right.
projects. And I'm gonna share these with you so that you can, and they're not mine at all. Some of them are, but some of them are not, because you're like, gosh, I don't even know where to start. Okay, so where to find me? DGOBLE2001 at DGoble2001 on Twitter and on Instagram. But you can get to all my social media on my website, dongoble.com.
Okay, great.
DONGOBLE. All of my social media is attached there. Now, video projects, introductions, video tutorials, do a short news package, do a vlog or a podcast, stop motion, a commercial, a public service announcement, a book review, green screen, message to the parents what they learned this week, music video, do a product pitch, have a book be a product, you're trying to pitch it, do a mock election, recreate a famous speech. How about video thank you notes, tours of the school, let's persuasive videos. So record like a persuasive advertisement, maybe for something on like ethos, logos, or pathos. How about response to literature prompts? A video journal is a great one. Recreate a character that and recreate the theme. Gosh, there are so many ideas. They are endless. And so I just think that we're not short on ideas. I think we need to just kind of, I would end with this. If you have an idea or you want to create an idea for a video project, take the summer and pick an app, pick one project that you're already doing you might want to enhance, and not look at it as a project, but work backwards. What would be some of the practice steps leading up to that? And develop that and do it yourself so that you know where you're fumbling and where you might need some clarification, because your students will end up in the same spot. And then if you put yourself through that process, you'll be able to address it a lot better when you're teaching it in the fall.
Awesome. Well, 2 o'clock. I always want to be respectful of both if we have people on, and especially the people who are giving up their Friday afternoons.
Absolutely.
You're what, an hour behind us, so you got extra time. But
this was really great.
Nisha's just waking up out there in Hawaii, so she's fine. She'll be hitting the beach. But I want to thank you so much, Don. We'll continue to catch up. You and I have to connect again in live. It's been too long.
I know.
And thank you all again for jumping in. If you have questions for Don, shoot a message. Follow him on Twitter. He's a great follow. And check out the website when you have time as we continue to move forward and bring in student engagement and different things like that. So,
Matt, real quick before I leave, look, the chat looks.
Maggie, thanks for your help. And Don, thank you.
If I can ask just one real quick question, the chat looks like it's pretty full. There may be some questions in there that I can answer. Will there a way for me to access that after our conversation here today?
Yeah, I'll copy. Before I log out, I save the video, and I'll take the chat.
And then one last thing I want to make sure I offer to everybody: if there's anything that I said that makes sense or doesn't make sense, or you decide to use something on my site and you get into the fire of it, Matt, I appreciate the invitation. So my offer is just hit me up. I'll be happy to answer any question when you're in the middle of a project or a fire or a practice, and I'll be happy to help virtually or jump on like this.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Don.
Thank you, Matt.
Again, stay safe. Don't go
You
visit.
too. Be well. Be well.
All right.
See ya.